you know. The last sign we covered was the sign of Scorpio. And Scorpio dealt primarily with lessons relative to the experience of penetrating the depths of consciousness via the emotions, via the experiences of power relative to money, sex, and death. All of which, for the evolving or progressing spirit, brings the individual to the Sagittarian phase, or the Sagittarian time, which is essentially and basically the time of finding direction, the time of consideration of where one is going. Not merely what one is doing, but where what one is doing is going. To some degree, the sign of Sagittarius implies seeking, therefore, direction. Considering all forms of possibilities relative to direction. Finding that direction and ultimately knowing beyond a doubt and going in that direction. Jupiter, the exoteric ruler of this particular time phase, implies expansion of consciousness, which relates to the process of seeking or learning and finding via the intellectual need or the mind's need or the consciousness need for knowledge. Not necessarily knowingness, but knowledge. At least information. Therefore, the sign of Sagittarius is esoterically ruled by the earth, whereupon one learns experiences which serve to activate the intelligence, not only the concrete intelligence, as indicated in the opposite sign of Sagittarius, which is called Gemini phase, but inner intelligence, which is related to the guidance process or ultimately the spiritual process. Therefore, the time of Sagittarius is a time of movement. It's a time of activity. Perhaps even a time of restlessness. For many individuals, that's all it amounts to. It's wandering restlessly from point to point. In fact, going between opposites rather than going straight through the middle, single-mindedly, moving from one opposite point to the other opposite point, which is the way of the individual caught in the confusion of duality. And the entire experience of having the precious situation of a spiritual circle or some kind of teaching connection, or Dharma connection, some association with various practices that might serve to make one and help one feel connected. All of this serves to eliminate, that is to say, decrease the karmic tendency to be darting from one extreme to the other. That is to say, the arrow which goes from point A to point Z, back and forth, without going straight down through the middle, from Z to A, from Z to A. From Z to A without ever touching B, so to speak. Once this experience becomes the case, when Sagittarius comes around, then there is a conscious notice of settlement to some degree, the direction having been realized, the direction having been cleared through the test of Scorpio. Then there is seeing the center, having that one-pointedness, seeing the goal, coming to the goal, realizing and knowing the goal, the spiritual goal. In essence, the mind then becomes the arrow. Consciously directed and consciously released, ultimately towards God of itself, consciousness of itself. Therefore, Sagittarius, as a positive sign, as an active sign, as an outgoing and creative sign, or phase, in this case, a time phase, is related to Aquarius, which is the sextile sign relative to Sagittarius in the progression of the zodiac. And the direction here then is towards group consciousness, knowledge and realization of the goal through group consciousness. In the sign of Sagittarius, all experience should be seen from the viewpoint of the realization of one's direction. Everything should be picked up along the way or dealt with as stuff which serves the journey. And only that should be taken. And the journey ultimately is for getting to the mountain, which is represented by the sign and time phase of Capricorn. Climbing. Attainment. Undergoing the ordeal of ascent, so to speak. Leaving time and space, matter and energy, or lower consciousness, material consciousness, completely, totally, absolutely behind. Sagittarius is getting to the mountain. Showing that the direction has been realized, it is known. One knows how to get where? Here. One not only knows where one is going, one is where one is going. And although Sagittarius relates to the mind relative to knowledge, it does not relate to, as Gemini, its opposite relates to, the intellectual mind. Intelligence in this case is the subtler spiritual guidance level of intelligence or knowingness. And this is what Sagittarius, as a sign phase and a fire sign phase, has to offer each and every individual progressing spirit soul as they move through apparent time and space in this dimension. Here and now. You know,